Good afternoon, everyone. We are recording and live for the Workday Performance Review session for teaching and research staff. For those I haven't met before, my name's Naomi Madsen and I'm Manager of the Professional Development Unit. When I first joined the university back in 2009, gosh, it seems like just yesterday, my mandate was to deliver a lot of performance review training to staff, and I've been doing it ever since. So this will be an interesting experience given the changes in our circumstances from yesterday. I'm very mindful that I am working in what is actually a really funky townhouse kind of environment, but that also means I don't have a lot of private space. So I'm sharing a table with my partner who's also doing his work. You may hear keyboard sounds in the background. My daughter has absconded to her room, although she sometimes startles me by appearing out of nowhere. And I've got two cats who've decided to have a disagreement over a toy with a feather. So I apologise for any background noises in advance. I believe there is a spray bottle that has just been put into play. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint slides with you, and please be a little bit patient. I'm using a technology setup that I only got used to last night. So it's making things a little bit challenging for me. If you've ever tried to use Microsoft accessories with a MacBook, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So welcome to this session. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge and respect the traditional custodians on whose ancestral land we are meeting today. For me, on the Adelaide Plains, that's the Kaurna people. And I would also like to acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to country. So I pay my respects to the custodians, elders, emerging leaders, and all Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people today. To give you a bit of a context for this session, it is designed as information sharing rather than interactive. The reason for that is we are all busy people, and given the current circumstances, I'm sure there are lots of things, particularly if you've got teaching next week, that you would like to be doing. So we will keep it as short as possible. But because there are a large number of people enrolled, we'd like you to keep your microphones off and your cameras off as well, which just minimises the load on technology for everyone who may have Wi-Fi at home that isn't as good as Wi-Fi at work. However, that being said, we're going to make it interactive by using the chat box. So if you've got any questions that come up during the session, please use the chat box. I am being supported today by Michelle Clinton, who worked very closely with me on the professional staff Workday Performance Review training. And Michelle will be able to look at the chat box and monitor and respond to questions or redirect if necessary. I'll also have a look at certain points throughout the presentation to see if there's anything I can answer. Just be mindful that we may not have all the answers right now, but we will let you know where to get more information at the end of the session. So that being said, I ran a session this morning and my technology decided to glitch out on me every now and then. Let's see if my keyboard's working. Nope, I knew that would be the case. There we go. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We're going to start off by looking at the bigger picture. So why do we have performance review? What's in it for you? And then we're going to focus in on what the process is going to look like in Workday. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of 2021, but also what it will mean for you in 2022. So we're going to go through those steps of looking at how do we get ready for a review meeting, how do we self-evaluate our past year's performance, set goals, development and research plans for the next 12 months, how do we have the review meeting with our supervisor, the challenges that might come up in that discussion, and we're also going to hone in on looking at feedback because there are some advantages and new tools that we can use through the Workday process to enhance the feedback opportunities available to you. And then we'll talk about what happens after everything has been done and dusted with the review and the ongoing discussions that we should be having with our supervisor. So hopefully that makes sense. We're going to interweave as much as possible the Workday process and the skills for performance review more broadly. So why do we have performance review? Essentially, it's an opportunity to talk about our own performance and align that to the things we're hoping to achieve with our career, the things our college or our institute is wanting us to achieve, and also the university's goals more broadly. What it means is being on the same page with our supervisor about our priorities, roles, responsibilities, performance expectations, workload management, and having that shared commitment between ourselves and our supervisor to our development and ensuring that our knowledge and skills is where it needs to be in order to perform our work. It's also an opportunity to get ongoing feedback, reward and recognition in an environment of openness, trust and respect. With that being said, however, I mean, nothing has really changed. Performance review for staff has been around since 1996. And so what happened in 2004 is that the Higher Education Workplace Relations requirements meant that we needed to introduce a much more formal approach to performance review in order to comply with government quality standards and therefore secure funding. So what that meant was a whole heap of new documentation. If you were around at the time, you might remember it, and a much more structured approach to performance review than previously. So when we think about academic performance review, we recognise it has both a looking backward and a looking forward component. It reviews your performance over the previous 12 months against the goals and development plan items and research plan items that you set then, and then it plans for your development research over the coming 12 months. The thing is, most staff focus on that review aspect, and that can make it a little bit anxiety provoking for people, but there is an equal focus on the development component. Ideally, performance review has benefits for you, not just for the university. So it's about supporting you to achieve your career goals. And there we go, keyboard doing its thing again. I've learnt the trick. I have to have my mouse cursor on the other screen for it to work. So what's in it for you? So if we look at the negative perception of performance review, there's often this sense that it's a tick and flick exercise. We do it once a year. It has negative expectations. There can be anxiety around it. This sense that it's all about poor performance or disciplinary issues. It's long, tedious, confusing, that it's your supervisor telling you what you have to do rather than two-way feedback. There's no sense that there's an ongoing discussion, and for many staff, they can feel like it's a waste of time. Ultimately, no one looks forward to performance review if you have that mindset. However, when we shift the focus to making performance review work for you, it reduces the stress and it works to support you in your career and work goals. So let's talk about some of the things that it can help you with. It provides you with an opportunity to really hone in on your bigger picture career. So answering some important questions. What are the expectations for what I need to be doing in my role? How are we going to understand when I've met those expectations and I'm ready for the next move? Getting a sense from your supervisor of how they perceive your performance and what's important about your work to the university and your team, and thinking about where there may be improvements or strengthenings. Your supervisor has a responsibility to work with you. Now, I just need to admit some people in the lobby. There we go. Done. Excellent. I think that was Michelle who did that for me, whoever. Thank you. I think the important thing here is that the formal discussion component of the performance review is just one aspect of it. Ideally, a performance review discussion should aim to be part of a bigger process that starts with your first day at work, when you're inducted, you attend orientation, and it involves those ongoing cycles of planning, developing, monitoring, reviewing, and even reward and recognition for your performance. So it's continuous. It encourages two-way communication between you and your supervisor. And so this means that discussions are not just once a year or formal, they can be planned or incidental informal discussions. So you may be having monthly catch-ups on a regular basis, or you may be having those less formal conversations that come when you bump into each other every now and then. Now, where was I up to? Sorry, I'm flicking through a couple of different screens. So it's the focus is on you and your supervisor working together. All right, so let's look at the different roles in the performance review process. Now, I'm mindful that some of you may have attended supervisor training in the last couple of years. If you're a supervisor who's already conducting reviews on staff, some of this will look very familiar, for which I apologise, but it's useful for people who haven't attended that. So in terms of the performance review process, it's your supervisor's responsibility to get it started, to get it moving, to make sure that you're clear about what the reasonable performance expectations are, consistent with your role, your classification, the college's priorities, which are underpinned by the university's values. They also then have a responsibility to continue the conversation with you and make sure that you're getting regular feedback throughout the year, deal with any performance issues as they arise, and make sure that they're working closely with our people and culture team to discuss any issues. For supervisors, it's also a really good opportunity to start to develop your own people management skills and really bring together your strategies for working effectively with staff. As a staff member, every time I hear that beep, I remember to shift my cursor. Your responsibility is to get involved in the conversation. Make sure that you're engaging with your supervisor with those regular discussions around your performance. Part of this is about understanding that a good performance review process helps us to embed a performance culture. So performance doesn't become a once a year exercise, it becomes part of our everyday working conversations. So part of the expectation for staff then is that you will both give and receive feedback as well as meet your performance goals. It means taking time to reflect on how you're doing overall and make any changes that need to happen. If there's anything coming up that will have an impact on your performance, it's proactively seeking out your supervisor and letting them know about what's coming up. For this year, it's going to be a bit different. And by that, I mean, we're going to get you to transition to doing performance review as part of Workday. And the system configuration means that we are working off a hybrid model. So we're going to be doing part of the performance review process using the PDF templates that you should be familiar with, and then part of it will be done using Workday. The reason for that is we want to use Workday fully from next year onwards. And so the work we're doing this year will help embed that process so that it will be a lot easier next year. And that's going to make a bit more sense when we do a bit of a walkthrough. So there's going to be some tricks to work around the system for this year, but it will set us up to fully implement performance review in Workday next year. So the transition process is going to look a little bit like this. You'll complete your review self-evaluation because Workday doesn't have your last period review goals entered. So you won't be entering the self-evaluation elements into Workday. You will be looking at entering your goals and development plans and your research plans into Workday, but they're the only component that you will take from the PDF template and put in Workday at this stage. So next year, it will be integrated. You'll be doing your review self-evaluation and your goals and development planning at the same time and entering both of them into Workday. You'll also need to prepare for your first meeting with your supervisor by updating your documentation. So supporting documents that you would normally have with your PDF review form will need to be uploaded to Workday. So in this case, for 2021, that will be the electronic version of the performance review template, your sets, development, research plans, CV, and so forth. And I'm going to be honest, it may feel a little clunky and weird this year, but it will improve your experience for next year. By that I mean the goals will be pre-populated and you can select them for carryover. Once you've prepared for your meeting with your supervisor, you have your meeting obviously and discuss and agree on your goals and development plans. Then once that's done, you transfer your goals, development plans into Workday, and that's when the normal cycle of performance review ongoing conversations happens. Now here's the really good news. If you've already had your performance review discussion with your supervisor this year, you've already done the first 4 steps of this process. What you will be doing is transferring your goals and development research plans into Workday. And I'll tell you what, copy and paste is your best friend here. If you're a new staff member and you haven't had a performance review conversation yet, Sorry, I've got a cat in the bookcase behind me, but he's up very high. Hopefully he won't disrupt the process. So if you're a new staff member, you won't have a self-evaluation aspect to complete, but you will still need to set your goals and development research plans in conversation with your supervisor before you upload them to Workday. All right, so let's have a look at what the normal process is. My cat has just launched himself from a very high bookshelf onto a cat tree. He's going to be a show pony. I will try to minimize how much I'm distracted by him. So what we're saying is that you would complete the template as per normal, and that's that guided process. So you will go through, answer the questions, and transfer over your goals and plans. Now, that being said, let's just refresh our memory about what the template looks like. So I'm just going to change my screen share to here's one I prepared earlier. Hopefully, here it is. So with any luck, you are now seeing the Teaching and Research Staff Academic Performance Review PDF form. So as you can see, this hasn't changed. It's still got the same information that it's had for the last year or so in there. And what you'll be completing before you meet with your supervisor is the usual. You'll talk about how you've performed against your sets, other evaluation in teaching. You'll talk about the goals and strategies that you set last year. You'll provide comments on how you met them or anything that got in the way. Now, this is the bit that will need to be transferred over into Workday. These agreed goals and strategies for teaching for future period, and so forth. You'll work it through the same for research as well as for your professional development plan. So we do need you to complete the professional development plan that is part of this template. And then once that's happened, you and your supervisor will sign this, and then this is what you will be uploading as part of your documentation to Workday. Hopefully that's familiar, but your supervisor can talk with you if you've not used this form before. All right, so let's change screen sharing again. Back to the PowerPoint. Gosh, I wish this were a bit more seamless, but we're doing okay. All right, so once you've completed that template, you will send it through with the supporting documentation to your supervisor ahead of your review meeting. Now, in 2022, Workday is going to follow the same process. So the questions for reflection and evaluation will be the same as what is in that template. And there will be integration for each area of focus with your evaluation and your future plans. So for example, teaching review and goals, research evaluation and goals, and your development plan. So what we're going to do for the rest of this session is talk a little bit about the general principles of performance review, and then we'll get into the detail of how we're integrating it with Workday for 2021, as well as how it's going to work in 2022. So when we start thinking about goal setting, some of the strategies to bear in mind are, how are you doing in your current role? What's your position description say about your role? It helps about looking at your key responsibilities, the outcomes, areas that you might want to strengthen, areas you might want to develop. But the important thing to remember when you're setting goals is that they need to be meaningful. Goals should not be tick and flick exercises. If you've not got a lot of experience at setting goals, or you're not sure that you're setting goals that are going to be useful, your supervisor can help refine and formulate your goals at that meeting. The key here is to at least have some general ideas about what you want to aim for to take to your meeting with your supervisor. You don't have to have it fully fleshed out, although obviously the more detail you have, the easier it will be for you during that conversation with your supervisor to get the details packed out. Then there's the development planning aspect. And so this is looking at what are your learning needs. And when we say learning needs, we're looking at continuous learning and growth in a range of ways. And Flinders has a strong commitment to providing all staff with the opportunity for development. And this is a key component of the performance review process. Think about your current role, think about the things that are coming up, workload, capacity building, and also review the academic profiles. If you're currently on probation, this will help you determine if you've met the requirements for probation, and it will also help you consider, am I ready for promotion? because that's an important topic to talk about with your supervisor if you think you're going to go for promotion in the next 12 months. So once you've looked at your goals and your development plan, we want you to complete the development plan that's included as part of the performance review template. So that PDF form I showed you earlier, use the template on that. Workday does have a template link built in, and it's slightly simplified, but for this year, use the PDF version. Again, you don't need to have all the details worked out for your development plan. It's something to discuss and agree with your supervisor. So once you've sent all that through to your supervisor, it's about getting yourself in the right mindset for the meeting. Some things to think about. It's important to go into it with an attitude of, I'm ready to talk about my work, I'm ready to talk about its progress. It's also an opportunity, if you're not clear about anything, to clarify the expectations for your role. So I'll keep emphasising this, that you and your supervisor really need to be on the same page about what is expected of you. It's also an opportunity to talk to your supervisor about any additional support you might need, as well as get some feedback on areas you might need to be working on or areas that are already strong. So we want to listen to that feedback in a way that is non-defensive. We've got a slide later on that talks a little bit about how we hear feedback and how we respond to it, so we'll cover that then. It's also about making a note of anything that you know is coming up that may have an impact on how you achieve your goals. It might be you've got a big block of extended leave booked in, or you've got something that is going to impact on your research performance. Make a note of it, talk about it with your supervisor at the meeting. It's also an opportunity to give your supervisor some feedback about how they're working with you and what would work well for you. How's this going so far? Making sense? Let me check the chat for any questions that maybe have not been responded to. No questions so far. Thank you. That's awesome. So let's keep rolling right along. All right, so once you've prepared for your meeting and your supervisor has told you when the meeting will be, you're going to go to the meeting, and I'm going to strongly recommend you take a printout of everything. So your performance review template and all the supplementary documentation. Your supervisor should have a copy of all of that, so you're both working off the same documentation. The thing is, performance review must be about the conversation and the dialogue. We don't want people to sit there filling out forms together. We don't want people to sit there typing things into Workday together. It interferes with the dialogue. It interferes with the openness and trust that you want to have in that conversation. So, performance review is about a conversation, not about typing or writing stuff into a form. The goal is to collaboratively work with your supervisor to understand how your performance is perceived, to discuss your achievements, your successes from the year just been, to talk about the opportunities or clarify if things have gone off the rails, and to take on board any feedback about things that need to change. Now, ideally, your supervisor will be skilled at providing you with lovely, objective, task-focused feedback to help you improve your performance. And no matter how well your supervisor gives feedback, it can still sometimes be hard to hear. So here's some tips and techniques on how to deal with feedback. Think about your response. If your first response is to jump in or argue or defend yourself, I recommend strategies as simple as just take a deep breath, use a go-to phrase. And by go-to phrase, I mean something that buys you a little bit of time. In this case, I think asking a question is useful, like, okay, can you tell me more about that, please? So you can get some understanding of what's going on. It's important to understand what your supervisor is saying. So ask questions to clarify or for examples. You could say something like, I'm not sure I fully understand the issue. Can you give me an example of when this has happened? And it's okay to ask for time to absorb the feedback before responding. Sometimes our first response is the knee-jerk defensive one, whereas our reasoned or later response might be a better one. So ask for time out. So something like, can we reconvene when I've had time to reflect and prepare a response to your feedback, please? If you're feeling stressed, practice some stress management techniques. So performance review can be anxiety provoking. Even if the news is all good, people can still get really angsty about it. So make sure you're looking out for your self-care during the meeting, whether that's breathing techniques or quiet moments. When you do get feedback, you do have choices about what you do with it. Sometimes you choose to act on it. Sometimes people choose to ignore it. Sometimes people do what we might call reluctant compliance or malicious compliance or passive-aggressive compliance. The first of these is obviously the preferred option, the act on it, but it's important to be open with your supervisor when you are struggling to receive feedback. So you can say things like, this is hard for me to hear, I've had a different perception of my abilities, so it may take some time for me to work on this. Can we talk about this at a later date? So think about your response to feedback and be prepared for responses that might take you by surprise. We can be caught out by how defensive we can feel. We can be caught out sometimes by the feedback, and we'll talk about why that can happen in a few slides. All right, I'm just checking I've got my fingers on the right keys. The other part of the conversation with your supervisor is clearly about setting goals and making sure that the goals you set are going to be workable. And with your supervisor, you'll finalise the goals that you're setting. And then, look, most of you are probably familiar with SMART goals. They've been around forever, and they do help to create goals that outline what you're wanting to achieve and the means of measuring your success. So basically, when we look at SMART goals, we're going to start with, are they specific? We're going to look at the objective. Is it clearly defined? Do we know and understand what needs to be achieved? Is it measurable? How do you know when you've actually achieved it? So you're going to need to have a clear idea of what the measures might look like, whether they're qualitative or quantitative. Is the goal actually achievable? So it needs to be realistic but challenging. Don't set yourself up for failure by making it too challenging, but make it something that is interesting for you. Relevance is important. It's not unheard of for staff to decide to set goals about things that don't actually have any relevance to their current or future role at Flinders. And so the supervisor's job then becomes bringing them back to, yes, but what can we work on that is aligned with college goals or university goals and so forth. So relevance is about whether it's meaningful to you and that it is adding to and contributing the university's goals. Time framed is about looking at when it's going to be done by, and be aware that one of the beauties of putting goals in Workday is that you can carry them across multiple time periods. So let's say your goal is something that's going to take 3 years to achieve. That's fine. You can still put it in Workday, and I'll show you how that works in a bit. So time framed also means things like setting milestone time points where you might need to check in on progress as well. Now look, SMART is not enough anymore because goals are now SMART's goals. So we have the stretch option. So some goals are going to be more challenging than others, and they're useful because they present opportunities for further development. But the thing to remember is if you want to do stretch goals, make sure that they're still achievable. Again, we don't want people setting themselves up for something that isn't going to be a success in the end. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully in the process of talking with your supervisor about your past performance, your future goals, your development plans, everything goes smoothly. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes things can go awry during that review discussion. So let's talk about some of the challenges that can come up. The first of these is there is a golden rule about performance reviews. There should be no surprises in the review meeting. You should already know from your ongoing discussions throughout the year what your supervisor thinks of your performance. However, if in that review meeting something comes up which is new to you, you've got the right to ask for the review process to be suspended while you discuss that issue separately. That being said, anything related to performance problems should be addressed outside of the review meeting with one caveat. If you're already aware of and working on the problem or have already resolved the problem, it still needs to be documented as part of your review process, and that can be really hard for people to hear. It's like, but I've dealt with that. The thing is, your performance review documentation needs to be an accurate reflection of performance over the whole year. So even if the issue has been fixed by the time you have your review, it's documented as part of that process. Emotional responses can happen for anyone at a review meeting. It's normal. They can run the full gamut of feelings, and it is okay to acknowledge how you're feeling. It's also okay to keep it to yourself if you don't feel like you want to discuss that with your supervisor. Your safety comes first. People get embarrassed. They can feel a bit of shame if they get upset during the review. But being distressed or anxious is not uncommon, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. We can also have our emotional state influenced by things not directly relating to the review process. You don't need to disclose these unless you feel comfortable doing so. Regardless of what is contributing to your emotional state, your supervisor should be responding empathetically and in a supportive manner. Sometimes you can't agree with your supervisor. You just have very different viewpoints, and that's okay. That happens. The important thing, if that is to occur, is to recognise when there's no productive way forward. Sometimes you just feel like you're bashing your heads together and you're not getting anywhere. That's fine. You don't have to give in. You don't have to push through. You don't have to keep arguing the point. The options that are available to you if a review discussion becomes challenging range from short options to longer options. It just depends on what's happening. So if you've got an emotional response, ask for a 5-minute timeout. Go grab a drink, go to the bathroom, walk it off, whatever you need to do to feel more in control. If it's not controllable, or if it's one of these issues that you can't work through, request an adjournment. This might be time to reflect, or you may choose then to consult with someone about your next steps. You're also able to request a support person for the review meeting. So it could be someone from People and Culture, it could be a friend or a colleague who will be able to help monitor your well-being during the conversation. Ideally, none of these challenges will happen, but it is always good to be prepared in advance just in case they do. Let's imagine now for a moment that everything went okay. You and your supervisor have agreed on your goals, your research plan, your development plan. The next step is to finalise the documentation. So let's have a look at that. So after the meeting, you've got your PDF template. You may be asked by your supervisor to amend or update it. There may be some changes needed, or you may need to just finalise a few things. That's okay. They'll add their own comments, and then once you've both agreed on it, you'll sign it off. But here's what happens next. What you need to put into Workday is take each goal from that template and enter it into the relevant section. So teaching goals, research goals, and your development plan. Your development plan can be summarised into Workday, and then you'll upload copies of your performance review template and supporting documents. Now, the thing to think about is that when it's complete, you'll need to submit it to your supervisor for review and acknowledgement, and it will then be returned to you to acknowledge with or without comments. Now, acknowledging a review, and acknowledge is the word that Workday uses, that's essentially signing it. So it's important to ensure that you're comfortable with what's being recorded in Workday, not just in the Workday template itself, but also in the supporting documentation. So if you acknowledge without comments, you've got nothing to add, you're satisfied with what's being documented. If you acknowledge a review with comments, you might have something additional to say, or you might want to add in something that was missed. But if you have concerns about your supervisor's comments, you should have a conversation with them first, ideally, and or seek support from People and Culture to talk through what your options are. Once your supervisor has acknowledged the review, the document will then be available in your Workday profile under the Performance tab. And I'm guessing you'd all like to see what that looks like. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you my Workday Performance Review. Now, I'm a professional staff member. The areas I need to fill in are going to look a little bit different to yours, but that's okay. It will give you an idea of what the user interface looks like, and I think that's the important thing. So let me switch screens to something else. there it is. It's hiding behind the template. There we go. So this is your Workday homepage, and the bit we're going to be looking at is this one here called Talent and Performance. So if I click on that, it will work. Excellent, good start. It takes me to my Talent and Performance dashboard, and you'll see that I've done my professional staff performance review this year, which in my case has meant setting goals and development items only. So it's fairly similar to what we're asking you to put in for your performance review. So you can see my goals are here, my development items are here. But if you want to actually see the review itself, down this section, have a look at reviews. And you can see you've got a couple of options from here. You can view it, and that will bring up your goals, your development plan, and anything else you've entered into Workday. Or, let's go back a screen, you can click this button called Create New PDF. Now, it takes a little while to work, but what it does do is give you a document that has all the information you've entered into Workday, and you can download it, and there it is. There I am. You can download it, you can save it. It might be helpful to remind you to have handy, or simply you can just come back into Workday anytime you want to have a look at what your performance review is like. I think one of the big advantages of Workday that I want to emphasise is this ability to make performance review much more of a living engagement than it has been. So once you've filled out the PDF, I'm taking a rough guess, for many people it's a file it, forget it until next year. But with Workday, you can just go in at any time, you can update, you can enter progress, you can measure milestones, you can get feedback. So it does have that benefit of being easier to update, quicker to update, able to get instant feedback than a PDF form. All right, so I'm just going to change screens again. There'll be a few minor demos throughout this session, but I'm mindful that my systems, and I've got staff as well, so I don't necessarily want to be showing you their performance reviews, even though I think they both gave me permission to do so. All right, so let's have a little look at what happens after it's all been documented in Workday. Then we go into the normal process of the follow-up actions and discussions. So when we're in between formal review discussions, our responsibility as staff is to look at our own performance and development using the performance review documentation in Workday. And like I said, you can just go in, you can update, you can mark goals as achieved when you've done them, you can measure progress, you can type in obstacles. And the advantage of this is when you come in next year to do your review, all that information is there. You don't have to go, oh, okay, so that goal that I did halfway through, what actually happened there? It's already in the system. You'll also want to keep in contact with your supervisor and have those informal catch-ups or clarification discussions as needed. What I also like about Workday is it has a feedback tool. So you can go in and you can ask for feedback. And once again, I will take you into my Workday screen so you can see where that sits. Because I actually think this is a really awesome strategy. We had a good question from the session this morning. Uh-oh, that's not the thing I wanted to share. Hang on. That's what I've got for having too many screens open, people. Minimize your screens. Was that the one I wanted open? There we go, my reviews Workday. It gives my screens weird names. So let's go back to the home page for talent and performance. And this is the bit I'm referring to here. Feedback, get feedback on self. So you can tap that button. You can enter the name of your supervisor in here. I believe you can also enter other people's names. Certainly when I played with it a bit earlier, it came up with both the people I supervise plus the people who I consider my peers because they are at my level also supervised by my manager. It might be different for you, so that's why I'm not going to click on it. but you can certainly ask for feedback from your supervisor, and you'll see there are some questions already built in here. Now, the good thing is you don't have to use them. You can pretty much remove all the questions, blah, 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 and then you can add your own question if you want to. So let's say you wanted specific feedback about something. Tell me how I went on this thing. And you can add that question and send it off to the people who you would like to get feedback from, and particularly your supervisor. So I actually think this is a really good functionality. The question arose this morning, could you use it for 360-degree feedback? Interesting idea. One of the challenges with the feedback tool, though, is it's not anonymous. So many 360-degree feedback tools have a degree of anonymity built in. This one doesn't. And there are also some quirks about how that information is passed on to you, the staff member. So we're going to talk a bit more about that. But I want to emphasise that this is a really good opportunity if you're not getting the feedback that you would like to be getting from your supervisor to actually ask for it. All right, so back to the PowerPoint. Share screen. Where are we up to? All right, you can also have a verbal conversation with your supervisor if you want more feedback. Hey, what do you think worked well or not so well about this thing? I wanted to check in and see how I'm doing. Is there anything you need me to be doing more or less of, and so forth. So use the Workday tool to keep track of your accomplishments. You can mark off goals as they're completed. You can change them from in progress to complete. You can track your comments. You can also share your success stories. I think it's really important. We don't often celebrate our successes as much as we should. But when we talk about our successes with colleagues, we can sometimes have doors open for us that otherwise wouldn't exist. If we've suggested some development activities, get involved with it, be active about it, apply it, share that knowledge with others, and take those opportunities to extend your capabilities when they arise and where appropriate. I'm mindful not everyone all the time has opportunities, nor do they have capacity to take advantage of those. But where you can, try to do so. And let your supervisor know if there are any issues coming up that are going to impact on your performance and your progress towards either your goals, your research plan, or your development plan. All right, so let's have a bit of an in-depth look at feedback. Because as you may have identified from the feedback tool in Workday, you might get asked for feedback about someone else. And that might be something you're not used to doing. It can be a bit daunting if you're not comfortable giving feedback, but it doesn't need to be. So here's some simple tips and techniques to providing effective feedback. Now, the first thing you want to do is, if you're asked for feedback in Workday, is ask the person who's requested it from you whether this will be shared immediately or reviewed by the supervisor first. So feedback that is shared immediately is, as it says, immediately available to the staff member. Whereas if it's reviewed by the supervisor first, they then have a choice to make about whether they release that feedback to the staff member. Look, it shouldn't make any difference to how you structure your feedback, but it is useful for you to know. And it may also have an impact on whether you are willing to provide feedback, for example, for a peer or a colleague. You might also need to consider if you're in a position to give feedback. If you're not, just tell them. If it's okay to say no. I mean, ideally, all feedback is helpful if we give it in an effective manner. And although we tend to characterise feedback as positive and constructive, most people read constructive as corrective. So have a think about the sort of feedback you're able and willing to give. Some feedback principles to bear in mind are that it should be objective, focus on facts, not hearsay, be specific, what happened or what the person did, and have a task focus. So that is about ensuring that you look at behaviours with relevant examples, and it keeps it objective and enables an evaluation of the work or behaviour rather than shaming or blaming the person. Also have a think about whether you've been asked to provide feedback for the whole year, or feedback on a specific thing, because that changes how you structure it. If you're asked to give feedback about a person, don't just focus on all the bad things or only the good things. Try to take a holistic approach across the relevant time frame, looking at the big picture rather than picking out the stuff that was small. One way to focus and structure your feedback is to use something that I'm lifting generously out of our session on how to write a job application, but I find it quite useful to frame how we think about feedback. So the STAR model gives us an opportunity, whoops, I've done the wrong thing there, to look at the situation. What was going on? The task, what was actually needed from the person in order to deal with the issue. What they actually did is the action component, and the result is what that meant for the person, the organisation, the work unit, the stakeholders, whatever. Look, you might not even need all those components in order to give good performance feedback. You might only need to describe the action and the result. You might also find that you're giving feedback on your supervisor at some stage. This is really good practice. Performance review is a two-way dialogue and a two-way feedback. So if that feels weird, think about what's working well in your relationship with your supervisor, what you like about the supervision, or consider what needs to be changed. Are there problems or issues with how you're supervised? So hopefully that little snapshot of giving feedback helps those of you who might be feeling nervy that you're going to get inundated with the requests for feedback. Just remember, if you've got nothing to say, it's okay to say no. All right, so let's look at casting our minds into the future, 12 months down the track, and what it's going to look like in Workday. So from 2022, you will be able to complete your performance review process fully in Workday. And that means it's going to look a little bit different to that first pie chart I showed you. For example, you will complete your review self-evaluation, including the goals, development plan and research plan components fully in Workday. It also means that the goals you're putting in now, this year, will be pre-populated. And if they're longer than 1 year, you can carry that forward. The question prompts will help you talk about your achievement or obstacles towards your goal, and then you can enter your future year goals and development plans, supporting documentation before submitting the review to your supervisor for discussion. So what this means is Workday then becomes your discussion document. You can print it off to take to your meeting. However, some people won't be comfortable doing that. Therefore, you can still use the old PDF template, but what you would then need to do next year is copy and paste your responses into Workday. The thing to think about is that you and your supervisor both have access to the same amount of information prior to having your review discussion. So you'd still have your review meeting with your supervisor, and then if there's amendments or changes needed to your goals or development items, your supervisor will get you to amend that in Workday, and once you've updated it as per your discussions, there's the submit button to hit. Your supervisor enters in their evaluation and comments, and then there's the acknowledgement process that we discussed. You acknowledge and your supervisor acknowledges, and once it's fully acknowledged, it then sits in your Workday widget, and it's available to both you and your supervisor via the talent and performance component of Workday. And then you're still going to have ongoing discussions. So what we're going to do is, I did mention Michelle Clinton was joining us. We're going to watch a video she prepared earlier. I can't remember how long ago this was prepared. Michelle, can you remember? About a year ago, maybe?
Yeah, probably 6 months ago. So 3 days.
Okay.
It was either February or September.
Thank you. So this is an actual step through of the process as it will work when performance reviews are fully in Workday. So I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry, I had to go back out because, as Michelle would be well aware, I have a habit of forgetting to share my sound, and in order for this video to work well, I need to share my sound. So I'm going to pause it at a couple of points just to explain a few things, and Michelle, please correct me if I'm wrong on those.
Welcome to the Flinders University Workday Help video on academic goal setting and review.
The example shown in this video captures the full teaching and research process. However, your academic role will determine the process you will need to complete. People and Culture will trigger a task for all academic staff to complete the academic performance review in the second half of each calendar year, and this will send a task to your Workday inbox. Please note the new application on your homepage called Talent and Performance, which is where you'll find your performance management information. Open your inbox and click on the task for the Self-Evaluation Academic Performance Review and click Go to Guided Editor. Click on Add to enter a goal for each section which appears. Select the competency that the goal relates to.
So competencies, this is one of the things that you may not have had to work with before. My understanding is, and I think Michelle would agree with me on this, is that the competencies are not mandatory. They are, however, the same for everyone. So they are things like judgment, problem solving, communication skills, and so forth. So if you want, you can use competencies, but I would have a conversation with your supervisor first about whether that's something they want you to do or that's something you need to do as part of this process. Right, back to the video.
Enter the category of the goal and the due date of the goal, which may be longer than the goal period. Select the status and enter an employee evaluation comment. Click Next.
Now, you will also have noticed that the employee evaluation comment sections are mandatory fields. So anytime you see a red asterisk, you can be really confident that you have to put something in here. Now, with your goals, if you think about what you've written for your goal at the start, you may not have anything to evaluate. You might not have started the goal yet. That's okay. You can put in not applicable or not yet started, whatever, but you need to put something in that employee evaluation field. You won't be able to move on until you do. You could also potentially put in additional comments relating to your goal, details, or any extra information such as progress already underway. So just remember, anytime you see employee evaluation with a red asterisk, you need to write something, and this year you may not have anything relevant to write in that section each time. So for example, the bit we're looking at now on your screens is a question where you would be looking back at your previous 12 months performance. Now for 2021, you won't have any of that information in Workday yet. So when it comes to the employee evaluation, you can simply put not applicable against each question. Because you've already answered them in the PDF performance review template document that you are uploading as part of your supporting paperwork to Workday. So back to the video.
Answer any questions for the question section and click Next to enter in your research and outputs and achievement goal. Again, the competency, the category, the due date, the status, and also your employee evaluation prior to clicking Next. Up next is the service and leadership goals, and you complete the process again, adding in your goals, what competencies the goal relates to, the category, the due date of the goal, the status, and again your employee evaluation comment. Click Next. Now you'll have some questions to answer, so fill in the answers to the questions as they appear and click Next. Using the professional development template link outside of Workday, complete the template. Then come back into the task and click Add to summarise the agreed development items for the coming year. Again, enter the development items, any additional information, and the competency it relates to. Select the category. Add in the start date if you have started the development item. You may also want to add in the completion date if you have completed the development item already, however, that's probably not the case. Enter in the status and a status note. You'll also need to enter in your employee evaluation comment and click Next. Enter any additional comments you wish to make regarding your review which is not contained within any attaching documentation and click Next to attach your documentation. Note there is a list here of what you need. Click Next and review any feedback that you may have been given. If not, click Next, and then you will receive a summary of all the information you have entered. Check that the information is correct, and if you need to, click on Guide Me on the right-hand side to go back and amend. Once we're happy, click Submit. Your manager will now have a task to complete the review of your entered goals. Once your manager completes their goal review task, a new task will appear in your inbox to acknowledge the review. Go to your inbox, click on the Manager Evaluation Provide Employee Review Comments task, and read through the review in the task prior to entering in your acknowledgement. You may choose to enter your acknowledgement with or without comments. If you select to enter a comment, enter in your comment and then click on the Submit button. Your manager will then have a similar acknowledgement task to complete. A copy of your performance review can be found in your Workday profile under the Performance tab and Performance Reviews. This ends the process.
Right, so does that make sense for everybody? I'm doing it again. I think I'm in an interactive session, so I'm asking lots of questions which nobody's going to respond to. So that's okay, we can cope with that. So hopefully that gives you a sense, but let's take it a little bit slower and a little bit step by step. So what I've done is I've got some screenshots out of Workday, and the reason I wanted you to see these is so that you can see that the questions that you're going to be asked to answer next year when you're doing the evaluation component is the same as what's currently in the template that you would be filling out as a PDF form. So for example, your teaching and related duties question is exactly the same as the review question in the PDF template. So there's nothing different about what we're doing in Workday in terms of process, in terms of reflection. It's simply a different tool for performance review. Now, what I wanted to highlight on here, see this exciting button up here, use existing goal. My understanding is if you were to click that button next year, it will bring up your goals from this year and it will populate it for you. And so that's really exciting. If you've got a goal that's going to take a couple of years to achieve, you don't want to be typing it in every year. You can just keep rolling it over. And that, for me, is a huge advantage of the Workday process. You'll see that your questions around research outputs and achievement is the same as it currently stands, as is the question set around service and leadership. So nothing has changed. You'll see also the professional development template. There's a link embedded into the Workday template. So you can click on that and that will bring up the Workday template, which you can complete outside of Workday and then come back and summarize it. But again, here's that exciting button. You can use an existing development item if you need to carry it across multiple years. So next page is where you load up all your documentation. For this year, we're also asking you to add in the performance review PDF template that has been signed off by you and your supervisor. So remember, if you've already had your performance review for this year, that's great. Transfer your goals and your development plan items into Workday and upload the documentation and you're done. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. All right, so go live date for academic performance review in Workday is the 17th of August, hence why we're running a lot of these sessions over the next couple of weeks. There will be some support and more information available to you on the go live date. including links to resources. So the resources that will be available to you include a video of one of these sessions. I'm running another one of these, I think, next week, and so I will pick which one I think went best as the one that we should upload to the system. There will also be a video guide to entering information into Workday, the one you've just watched, as well as a comprehensive user guide. Some other things to think about: there's the Workday support page, there is the performance review website, which is where a lot of these resources will be located. You should also have conversations with your people and culture business partners or coordinators, as they will be a really good resource for navigating the Workday system. For more broad performance related issues, there's also your Dean People and Resources. And if you have any issues, questions or concerns, there's also Service One. So you can raise a Workday request via Service One at any time. And I think that's pretty much it for the session. So let's go to the chat, see if there are any questions, and I can see a red dot. And Michelle's already answered Svetlana's question. Thank you, Michelle. So does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask verbally rather than type it into chat? Svetlana, I can see your question about academic workload modelling. Now, that's not a question that Michelle or I can answer, because I think that's something that will need to be referred back to your Dean People and Resources for how they're going to use the information that comes out of the performance review process. So definitely have a conversation with your Dean P&R about that one. Going back to the process for new staff this year. All right, so that was a few slides back. And in fact, I can probably go back to that one. No, I don't think it's actually in a slide. All right, so for new staff this year, because they don't have an evaluation element, the conversation with their supervisor still needs to happen, but it is a conversation about what my goals, research and development plans are for the next 12 months. And then once they've had that conversation and filled out a goal document, a development document and a research planning document, those will then be uploaded to Workday. So that will be great, because for new staff, they will then be set up for next year to review those goals fully in Workday and set new goals for the following 12 months. So similar process, except they're not going to have the evaluation elements of the review conversation. Does that make sense?
I'll just pop a little bit of extra information into that answer for you as well there. If you are a new starter and you've started after the 1st of January this year, you may not receive the task in Workday itself, but you may still be able to go in and add any goals for next year. So you might not receive a task in your inbox, but you can certainly add goals into your talent and performance dashboard.
Okay, that's news. Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to try to remember that for future sessions in case the question comes up again.
No dramas.
Is this information valid for people acting solely in the role of placement facilitators? Michelle, any thoughts?
I don't believe it is, but we'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. So, Chris, I think you've come in as a guest, but I'm pretty sure I can still track your attendance for you. I will pass that one back through to the Dean's P&R to get a response. Right, any other questions? I keep looking off to the side because my cat has the weirdest expression on his face. He looks like he's trying not to fall asleep. It's very bizarre. I'm just glad he hasn't crawled across my keyboard, because I don't know what that would do to this technological setup I've got here. All right, so don't forget, if you have any questions, you can ask your people and culture business partners, your people and culture coordinators, or send through a request on Service One. We are running more of these sessions, so if you know someone who missed out today, and I acknowledge, oh, that's a very good question, Grace. I have 2 cats. I am currently staring at Orson, he's the grey one, and Margot is asleep on the couch behind us, so no, in front of me. So two of them, they don't really get along, but I think that's fairly normal for cats. All right, so resources will be made available to you. I'm also going to send you a copy of the PowerPoint. As you know, I've been recording the session, so at some stage or another that will be uploaded to the performance reviews site. So if there's no further questions, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for being second cab off the rank. It's a good opportunity for us to really refine the session. So good luck, and thank you very much for joining us. I'll stop recording now. When I can remember where to hit. There we go, stop recording.